English Practice Podcasts from EnglishSpanishLink.com. Hello, and this is Dr. Mike, and today I'm going to talk to you about the British national drink, tea. Tea time. I distinctly remember. That means I remember very well a scene from the film The Queen. It was 5 o'clock in the afternoon in Buckingham Palace, and the maid, that is a girl who works and helps in a house, the maid, brought tea for the Queen and her husband, Prince Philip. Prince Philip poured the tea into a cup and gave it to the Queen. "Your tea, dear," he said. Then the telephone rang. "Don't answer that," said Prince Philip. "It's tea time." But the Queen picked up the telephone. It was Tony Blair, the British Prime Minister at that time. Then there was a long argument between the Queen and Tony Blair about what to do about Lady Diana's funeral. At the end of the conversation, the Queen put down the telephone, and she was very upset. She was very worried and sad, upset. Then Prince Philip came to where the Queen was sitting and picked up her teacup. "And now your tea's gone cold," he said. For some people, tea time is very, very important. Tea is a very important drink for the British. George Orwell, the author of the novel 1984, wrote an essay called "A Nice Cup of Tea." He said that thanks to tea, Britain had a civilization. And did you know that every day the British drink 165 million cups of tea? In the 17th century, green tea was brought from China and served for the first time in a well-known coffee house in London. Coffee houses were only for the wealthy people, people with a lot of money, wealthy. But nobody knew what tea was. So a notice was put up, a sign with writing on it a notice. That excellent drink from China, recommended by doctors, that the Chinese call cha and we call tea. And still, today, the British use that Chinese word, cha. Would you like a cup of cha? We say. In 1706, a man called Thomas Twining opened the first tea shop in London at 216 The Strand, which is a famous street in the centre of London. That tea shop is still there today. Stephen Twining, who is the owner today, is the 10th generation. Then in the 18th century, black tea became more popular, and more wealthy people went to coffee houses or tea houses to drink tea and eat chocolates. They paid 1 penny to go in, and for 1 penny they could drink 1 cup of tea free. Some people say that tea was very important during the Industrial Revolution in Great Britain. Tea was given to the factory workers, the people who worked in the factory workers, in the afternoon. Now, tea has a stimulant, and the workers were given snacks with sugar, so now the workers could go back to the factory and work more hours. Also, the boiled water used to make tea killed the germs and bacteria that caused terrible diseases like dysentery, cholera and typhoid. The Great British Teatime had started. And it is true that tea is now drunk by all classes in British society. Well, after all that talking, I feel like a nice cup of tea. But how do you make a nice cup of tea? Or how do you brew tea? That means to put hot water onto leaves to make a drink. That's spelt B-R-E-W, brew. Well, tea can be drunk in a cup or a mug. A mug is a very large cup. First, you must boil the water in a kettle. The Spanish say tetera. Then you pour a little water into the teapot. The Spanish also call this tetera, which is confusing. The hot water warms the teapot. Then you pour the water out. Then you put some tea into the teapot. 1 teaspoon of tea for each person and one for the teapot. Boil the water again, and pour the water into the teapot. Put on the lid and put a tea cosy on the teapot. A tea cosy is a little warm coat that keeps the tea nice and warm. Then let the tea brew for 2 to 5 minutes. Well, Fiona, how was the weather in Manchester?
Well, very nice really for the time of year. It rained a little in the mornings, but then brightened up in the afternoon.
Ah, tea's ready, I think. So, then put a tea strainer on top of the cup. A tea strainer stops the tea leaves going into the cup. And now you pour the tea into the cups. Finally, your guests can add milk or lemon or sugar. There we are, Fiona. Ah, now, that's what I call a nice cup of tea.
Very nice, Dr. Mike. So you can buy English tea in Spain, can you?
Test time. Listen to these definitions and say the words in English. A very big cup. A mug. To put the hot tea into the cup. Pour the tea. To make the water very, very hot. Boil the water. The thing we use to boil the water. A kettle. The thing where we put the hot water and the tea. A teapot. The thing we put on the teapot to keep the tea warm. A tea cosy. The thing we put on the cup to stop the tea leaves going in. A tea strainer. A very small spoon we use for tea. A teaspoon. If you'd like to see the transcript of this podcast and other activities and exercises for learning English, you can visit my website at EnglishSpanishLink.com. Music was from bensound.com. That's all from Dr. Mike. Until next time.